All right. Hello, friends and people.
When you shop at Fred Meyer, you can double your savings because every time.
Okay. Wasn't expecting an advertisement right when I got started. All right. I will come back to that. But anyway, hello, people. Today I am going to be getting into a project that's starting just from the beginning. So let me see here. I need to pull this over onto my shared screen, and we can see that we have a project here. It has literally nothing in it. So we're going to start from 0 and look into getting some automated code quality checks for our projects. So let's get started. We're going to come here, and because I'm a JavaScript developer, this is going to be a JavaScript project, which means I'm probably going to want to npm init this project. And it's going to ask me some things. GHA, we're going to call it GitHub Actions. Sure, because we want to use a name that isn't taken. Version doesn't really matter. Description doesn't matter. Entry point index.js, sure. Test command. We will have a test command. We're not going to define it, which I think is going to set it to npm test by default. And it is going to keep going. So keywords, fine. Authors, empty. License is empty. It's going to ask me if this looks okay. I say yes. And then we can look at our code. So that's going to generate a package.json file for me. I actually am going to set this to private and just get rid of the version because I don't think I'm going to be publishing it. So we're going to set this to private true. The description I don't care for. Main.js I don't think we need because that's when the package is shared publicly. Author we don't need, and license we don't need because after all, this is just going to be our local thing. So this is basically the minimum that we can get started with. So next, what do I need? I need an actual function. So let's look into that. I'm going to build a folder called source. And I got ads now. Let's see. I'm now live. We got stream elements chatting in here. Game development, getting into GitHub. Okay, cool. Yeah, I got started with stream elements. Yeah, I don't know what happened with those ads. I didn't have ads before, and seems like now I do. So anyway, how's it going, Kotin? How you been? Hope you didn't miss me too much on Friday. Glad to be back. But I actually am only going to be streaming today this week because I'm doing a little vacation. I'm going to go visit family starting on Wednesday. So I won't be back until next week as well. Anyway, what were we doing? We created a source folder. We're going to create our super cool function, and we're going to call it, what are we going to call it? I guess we'll just be boring and call it, we'll call it main.js, main.js. And there's a couple things that we need to do here. First of all, we want to make sure that we're maintaining code quality practices. So what is the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to create a function. We're going to say, what is an actual useful function? There's an actual useful function called, let's see, export const get type, which is going to equal a function that takes in a value and is going to return. Actually, this is exactly what I was going to have it return, except this needs to be .to lowercase. And then we'll have another function that we're going to call, let's see, have another function called isType, and I'm going to have, let's see here, we're going to have this one just do that, and this one is going to do type. And we're going to say that equals type. And this is, I don't know, a couple of utilities that we want. Essentially, this one's going to return the type of the object. We'll explain why that's important briefly. And then this one is going to check whether the type of the object matches the type that you're asking for. So right away, the things that I want to focus on is not so much what we're going to be doing today or what functionality we're going to be adding today, but rather being able to maintain consistent coding practices across our application and making sure that things work as expected and trying to automate that eventually. So the first thing I like to do with a project like this is, well, actually probably I like to set this, we don't need to do this in most projects. In fact, most will probably have a build step, so you don't want to do this. But for now, we're going to say type is module. That way we can use the export import syntax. And that should be fine. But now what I want to want to highlight right now is we have some different practices in our application. Or let's say, I mean, arrow function doesn't matter, but let's say, I don't know, maybe this is like a let, right? So we're defining one variable with a const. We're defining another variable with a let in a case where we're not going to redefine the variable. We have one function that uses parentheses. We have one that does not. We have one bit of code that has semicolons, and we have one that does not. So how are we going to fix some of this stuff? And also, I think the first thing I'm going to add is before we get into that, I want to get into typing. So what if this is like return, instead of triple equals, it's going to be like plus type, right? This right now, if we call this function, we could introduce some bugs to our code that could otherwise be called. Let me copy this into a function called utils. There we go. And then in main.js, I'm going to import these. Import whatever from /utils. No help with that one. That's fine. Utils.js. Cool. What do we have in there? We've got get type and is type. Okay, and if I wanted to say, let's see, if I'm writing a script and I'm going to say console.log get type, no, is type, and we're going to pass in a string, and then we're going to pass in the number 4, right? So right now we have, this will actually work because we're using a plus sign here, and technically that's going to be the type. But one thing that we can do to improve code quality across our work and across the work that our team is doing is we can start adding some type annotations or type definitions. So I'm going to create a new file in the root of my project called tsconfig.json. And then I'm actually going to copy some information from another project into here. And what this is going to do is a number of things. This is going to provide some rules for a TypeScript compiler that's going to tell TypeScript, hey, go ahead and allow checking or allow JavaScript in your workflow. Please check JavaScript files and set everything to true. And the reason why we're using this TypeScript config file in our project, we're not actually going to install any dependencies. But if we're using VS Code, VS Code has TypeScript built in. So when we open up our project, it should have told us something about that. Let me see. If I rename this to something else, yeah, it's getting it automatically. So I don't know where I'm going wrong here. I think I may have to reload. VS Code for this to work. So let me close this, and I'm going to open it one more time and bring it over. What is TypeScript, and when should you try to learn it? That is a very good question. So yeah, sometimes I just take some knowledge for granted for sure. So TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And for some reason, it's not working for me. Okay, well, I'll hopefully get this figured out soon. But TypeScript is what's considered a superset of JavaScript, and that means that it is the JavaScript. It's a different programming language that uses JavaScript as a foundation and then builds additional features on top of JavaScript. So everything that runs in JavaScript will also work inside of TypeScript. But TypeScript has some special features. So while this, let me see, let v equal 2 is valid JavaScript, in TypeScript, you can do something that has like a little bit different syntax, where you can do like let v colon number equal 2. And what this syntax does, let's see, that's only because we're in a JavaScript file. So if I were to say like main.ts, we're getting these red squigglies. Copy that. In JavaScript, that would not work. JavaScript would say, I have no idea what the heck you're trying to do here. We get these red squigglies. In TypeScript, we don't get red squigglies because this is what the syntax allows for. So what this does is, if you are coming from a different programming background, you may have heard of strictly typed versus loosely typed languages, or type definitions or typing. So what JavaScript does is it lets you define more strictly what type of values things are. So in this case, we're defining a variable, and we're saying that this variable is always going to be a number, which means in JavaScript, you can say v, you can reassign v to a string, right? And then this is going to complain because, well, yeah, okay, I guess TypeScript is working now. Interesting. Oh, yeah, okay, it was working. Let me turn this off really quick. There we go. Close that, open that. Okay, so in JavaScript, this is a perfectly valid thing to do. You can say, I'm going to start with a variable that's instantiated as the number 2, and then I'm going to change that variable from a number to a string. If you want to, in TypeScript, you can say, hey, this variable is actually only allowed to be a number, which means, although this is valid JavaScript, which will run within TypeScript, TypeScript is a tool that will help you as a developer writing code to catch little bugs like this and say, oh, you know what? That actually shouldn't be a string of number 5. That should be an actual number 5. So I can cast that from a string to a number, and then TypeScript is happy. So it's just a way to maintain some code quality, avoid certain errors that can be caught from statically typed values. And hopefully, as I continue today, we're going to get a better understanding of what it is from a practical perspective. So let's get back into this. This is allowed in JavaScript. This is all looking good. We can turn our TypeScript back on with this tsconfig.json file. And so far, everything is working just fine, right? Now, if I were to say that what I expect this to do is return a Boolean. So it's going to tell me that if an object is a type of object or if a string is a type of string, I expect this function to always return a Boolean, right? So it should either return true or false. And what can I do with true or false? What can I do with true or false? Not much, really. I think, let's see. This was a bad example because I can't really do much with it. Let's do another function. It's going to be much easier. And we're going to say double. So it's going to take a value and it's going to return value times 2. Very simple. Okay, so we're starting with that, and we're going to say this. So I'm calling double with 2 parameters. Now, right now, if I disable TypeScript, so just rename this file, so TypeScript is not running, and I open this up, we're going to see that, sure enough, JavaScript doesn't really have a problem with me calling double with string and the parameter 4, even though my double function only takes 1 parameter, and really that parameter is going to be a number because a string times 2 will throw an error. Let me pull up a browser so we can actually see some of this. Open up my console, and we're going to have, if I try and do a string times 2, JavaScript's going to say, that's actually not a number. And so that's kind of a problem. It's going to break what our application thinks is supposed to happen. So right away, just by enabling TypeScript to run with JavaScript, we can see that we get this red little squiggly and says, hey, this function, I actually only expected 1 parameter, and now you're giving me 2. So this is unnecessary. It's not really going to hurt our application from running, but it is handy as a developer to say, okay, if something changes with my APIs or the application another developer I'm working with changes some code somewhere throughout the project, it's handy to know when something doesn't work, that doesn't behave the way we expect. Now, we still have this issue where we know that double should actually expect a number, and we're passing it a string. Now, it would be handy if we got that red little squiggly to tell us how to fix that. So if we go to utils, the way that I prefer working with TypeScript is actually not to work with TypeScript at all, but to work with this syntax that TypeScript understands, where we use JavaScript comment blocks to describe what this function does. So I'm going to say, I could say what this function returns. I could say it returns a string. And then now we can see, as I'm describing what this function does, that this function returns a string. This function is going to say, hey, you're actually returning a number, which is not assignable to the type of string. So I say, oh, yeah, sorry about that. And I can say this actually should return a number. So now this is happy. If JavaScript can actually inherently determine what value it's supposed to return, it will describe that for you. So if we hover over this function name, we can see the sort of type annotation for it, and we can see that it's a function called double that takes a variable or a parameter, which can be anything, and returns a number. Great. Well, what if we want to, yes, in LeetCode, yeah. So what if we wanted to make it easier for anyone using this function to avoid making this mistake of passing in a string where it should be a number? So we can actually go here and say, hey, this parameter, which we have here, which we've just called v, this should actually not be of type any, this should be of type number. So now if I were to try and run something here and say like v dot to uppercase, which is a method on a string, the code editor is going to yell at us and say, hey, you can't call to uppercase on a string because it doesn't exist on a type of number, and you told me this is supposed to be a number. Again, if we set this to star or any, or if we just omit it completely, it will just assume the type of any, and then you can call whatever you want. Another additional benefit to having these type annotations is right now, GitHub Copilot, I should probably disable because it's like going to recommend things for me, but you can hit, in my case, Control Space, and I'll get this auto suggest of things that might exist there. And you can see that it's just taking the best stab at whatever might be there based on, I don't know, whatever it thinks. By adding these type annotations and saying this is going to be a number, we actually have access to all of the methods on the number. And it's going to tell us, it's going to suggest those for us. And it's not going to suggest anything that doesn't exist on a type of number. So I can say, cool, number to string, right? Or something like that. Or if this function is supposed to return a string, and right now it's returning a number, we can say, okay, well then how about we return that dot, and then we can say toString, right? So I get all of those suggestions or autocomplete, which is really handy as someone writing the functions. And then someone else that is consuming the functions gets the benefit of having these red little squigglies. I should probably zoom in a little bit. How's that? That seems a little bit big. Let's go there. Someone that's consuming the function gets to see, oh, shoot, that's not supposed to take in a string. That's supposed to take in a number, right? Now it's nice and happy. Cool. That's TypeScript. So let's add the type annotations for the rest of these. We're going to say const doubled equals double that. Const type equals get type of doubled, sure. And const is type, or whatever was it, is, yeah, sure, number. It's going to be is type doubled number. We can see that, let's see, doubled, we know that that's going to be a number now because our function here tells us that it returns a number. It takes a value or a parameter that's a number, and it returns a number. So we know that doubled is going to be a number. And then type, when we look at the function annotation for get type, we can see that it takes a parameter that can be anything, and it doesn't really know what it returns anything as well. So type right now, as far as our code editor is concerned, can be anything. The same with is type. This takes two parameters. One can be anything. The first one can be anything. The second one can be anything, and it can return anything. So if we leave this out, I think it's okay. It's currently not going to care because it actually doesn't know which parameters are required. If I keep that in and I pass a third one, number 5, it's going to complain because it knows at least that it does take two parameters. One may be optional, two may be optional, but definitely we don't need a third one. So that's some help that TypeScript is giving us. But we also know that this function, or even this function, I could just like pass in nothing and it's not going to complain because it doesn't know. It knows that it may have a parameter, but that parameter may be optional. So to make these work a little bit more nicely, we can say, hey, this function here, it actually does take a parameter. And that parameter is going to be anything because after all, we want to get the type of an unknown variable. And what's it going to return? It shouldn't return anything. It should actually return, whoops, returns, and it's going to always return a string. So in this case, because TypeScript cannot infer what type this function returns, we have to explicitly describe it here. And that way we say this function always returns a string and always takes a variable that can be anything. So now let's see. I think if I leave this out, I should complain because that should have been a required parameter. That's weird. I feel like that should have been a required parameter because the syntax for optional parameters is to put square brackets around it. But we can move on. Okay, so now we know that this is going to be a string, which means type now doesn't have the type annotation of any. It has the type annotation of string, which means we're not going to use it, so that's not a problem. And then isNumber also has that same problem of having the return value being anything, which means if we compare the user experience of doing type and pressing period, we see all of the methods that can run on a string, such as, I don't know, search, slice, whatever. But if we tried to do the same with isNumber dot, I don't get any sort of help with what it's going to do or what I can do with it. So we're going to do the same thing here and say, hey, just so you know, this first value can be anything. This second value actually needs to be a string. And this is going to return a Boolean. Okay, so once again, we have, actually, if I were to leave that out, what's it thinking? It thinks that it's returning a string. So because now it knows, this is kind of cool. Right now, the type annotation is the first parameter is anything, the second parameter is anything, and it's going to return anything because it doesn't know what the heck these two could possibly be. But just by setting the second parameter to a string, it knows that when you add something to a string, it's going to convert that to a string. So it can infer that whatever you do, that second parameter that we described as a string means that this function is always going to return a string. So that's pretty interesting because if I did something like 4 or 5 plus yo, we do in fact get number plus string equals that number cast into a string plus the string. Same, I think, if we do something like an array. Well, an empty array would get that. An array with the number 1 in it, comma 2, comma 3 would get that array converted to a string plus whatever. And then I think the same with an object should be not a problem. Everything is just converted to a string. Now I guess object is a little bit different. I do object colon 1. Okay, well, it's either going to be a string or not a number. Cool. Let's see. Where is... I'm going to get some more music going, I think. Doop, doop, doop. Any questions so far? While I get my music set up. Where are we vacationing at? I'm going to go visit my brother who lives in the Monterey Bay area. I haven't seen him in a while, so it'll be good to catch up with him. Okay, let's see. What have we got here? New New playlist today. Let's try this one. Still chiptunes, of course. All right, I'm feeling this. I'll keep it down though a little bit. Okay, so next thing is next. Now that I've got these functions sort of figured out, yeah, the aquarium in Monterey is pretty cool. I've been several times, and yeah, it's pretty cool when they switch up some of the exhibits. It's always fun to visit. All right, keep it down a little bit so I can actually think. So yeah, what I was getting at here is, so if we think that this type is supposed to be a number or whatever, the TypeScript stuff just makes it easy to avoid, to work with things and expect them, keep code working and avoid certain bugs. So in this case, I want this function to return a Boolean because after all, I'm checking if it's if the variable that I pass in matches the type that I pass in. And of course, this catches a bug because that bug we put there deliberately. And this is what we actually want this function to do. So it helps us catch that bug. This works great. This helps the people that are consuming this to know that this is a Boolean. Therefore, you can do value of, I guess, which is interesting. But okay, sure, if it's true or not. Cool. So that is some TypeScripty stuff, and I'm not going to go like. There's a lot that we can take that very far, but I think that's as far as I'm going to take this. So next things next is we do have a little bit of disparity here between how we are writing our code and just some of the style conventions. So like I showed before, in some cases we have semicolons, in other cases we do not. Whatever, it doesn't really matter to me what you prefer, but what I want to show is how we can get some more consistency in our code base. So I think what we need to do is we're going to go to our code here, and we're going to say npm install, actually, npm install a dev dependency, and we're going to install Eslint. And what Eslint does is it will kind of do that same thing that TypeScript does, where it gives us little red squigglies when we're doing something wrong. But instead of it being super strict about doing things that are functionally incorrect, it's going to tell us things that are stylistically incorrect. So with that installed, I think what we can do is go to our package.json, and we're going to add another. We're going to get rid of this script. We're going to add our first script called lint. Cool. Thanks, Eslint, or thanks, GitHub Copilot, for writing that in for me. I'm actually going to change this, though. So I'm not going to define the extensions. I'm just going to say that Eslint is going to run on this source folder because that's the folder that I am putting my code in. So we're telling Eslint, hey, do your thing on this source folder. So if I, just starting out, go back to my terminal and I say npm run lint, it's going to do some things and say, couldn't find a configuration file to set it up, run this. So that's great. We're going to do that, hit that. And what that is going to do is walk us through setting up this project with Eslint. So what do we want to do? Let's see. It's asking us some questions. We want to check syntax only, check syntax and find problems, check syntax, find problems, and enforce code style. And I think that's the one that I want. What type of modules does your project use? JavaScript modules, CommonJS. We're using JavaScript modules. Which framework does your project use? Right now, we're using none of these. And let's see. Does your project use TypeScript? This one's kind of weird because we're not actually using TypeScript, but we're using it to check our stuff. So I'm going to say yes. Okay, where does your code run? Browser. It runs in the browser. Maybe it runs in Node, so it's both. Both of those are selected. And then how would you like to define a style for your project? Use a popular style guide, answer questions. Let's answer questions. What format do you want your config to be in? I'm going to go with JavaScript. Do you prefer tabs or spaces? I'm going to go spaces. Double versus single quotes. I'll say singles. What line endings? Unix. Do I require semicolons or not? And this is where I'm curious if Stony Eagle is on the stream. I don't think he is. So do I require semicolons? No. Or actually, dang, I should have said yes. But okay. The config you've selected requires the following dependencies: TypeScript Eslint, Eslint plugin, latest, TypeScript Eslint parser. Okay, would I like to install those now? Sure. And then it will run the installation script. Okay, looking good. So what did that do for us so far? That added a new file called eslintrc.cjs. Defined a whole bunch of things, and even though I told it that I prefer spaces, it kind of used tabs anyway. Or no, it uses spaces. But I prefer indent using spaces. 2 spaces, please. Oh, that's frustrating. Do that. What is this complaining about? That's so weird. All right, whatever. Okay, so what am I doing? Right, so my rules, what this is doing for me is it sets up a configuration file that, well, I'll go through explaining what these are in a moment. If we look at our main.js, though, we should see some new changes into the little squigglies that we were seeing before. Now we can see that under the semicolons, we have this red squiggly, and the semicolon here, we have a red squiggly. And under these 2 variables, which we have defined but have not used, we have these yellow squigglies. And if we hover over these, we can actually see a little bit more information, where before we just saw const is Boolean, or is number is the type of Boolean. Now we're seeing more information where, let's see, TypeScript is telling us, hey, is number is declared, but its value is never used. And ESLint here is telling us, is number is assigned a value but is never used. Now those are both the same technically, but they're coming from different tooling, and that's fine. If we hover over our semicolon here, we get this message that says, hey, you have an extra semicolon. So let's see how we can fix this stuff, or where that's coming from. So ESLint, what it's doing is I've configured my VS Code editor to look for or allow Eslint to tell me about errors in my code, stylistic errors. Keep in mind that these don't have any impact on how the application actually runs, but it is handy when you have a team to keep consistent coding practices. So if I don't want semicolons, I want to make sure that people see red squigglies when they accidentally include semicolons. Or conversely, if I want to change it, you can change it however you want. So if I were to go down to that semicolon thing, I think if I just get rid of this rule and then like reload that file, it's actually not going to care. And if I add the rule, and I say semicolons will be an error, and we always want semicolons, then I can close this and reopen it, and I can see now those little red squigglies are in a different place. Instead of the semicolons having errors, I have errors where I'm lacking semicolons. And another cool thing that you can do with Eslint and VS Code is you can go to your rules, your VS Code settings, and say format Eslint, something like that. So you can turn your default formatter to use whatever you want. In my case, I'm using Eslint, which is, I think, a plugin somewhere in here. Eslint, there it is. I have this Eslint plugin installed. And I can tell VS Code, hey, when you format stuff, I want to use the Eslint formatter. And then you can also tell VS Code, hey, I want you to format whenever I hit save. And the result is, if I have a lot of code like this with a lot of errors in it, all of these red squigglies where I'm missing semicolons, I can just hit save, and VS Code is going to run my formatter, which is Eslint. Eslint is going to say, hey, I know that this problem, I know this is a fixable problem, so I can just go ahead and take care of it for you. Some things, some errors, like this duplicate types, Eslint doesn't know what to do with this because, of course, it's not just going to delete a line of code for me or rename it to something that I'm not familiar with. So it's not going to touch that. But the stuff that it can do, like the semicolons, it's going to go ahead and handle that for me. So once again, let's see that one more time. If I delete all of my semicolons and hit save, it's going to add those for me. Cool. So that is some type definitions and some coding practices. So let's see if I can add the styles that I personally like. So I have another VS Code instance. Let me hit. I have another file over here where I have all of my rules that I usually use. And let's see. So I want to parser. Okay. Parser options, source type is module, ECMA version is latest, sure, plugins. Okay, so the rules. Here, my indentations, I want to indent with 2 spaces instead of 4. So now we can see that as I made that change, I have some indentations here, and I'm getting the red squigglies because this is indented by 4 spaces instead of 2. If I hit save, I think, yep, it's going to automatically fix that for me. And then, let's see, what are some other ones? My plugins, I've got my rules, I have my extends. Okay, I've got my extends. Yeah, extend the recommended settings from Eslint. And then the TypeScript recommended, that's fine. And then down here where I actually have my rules, I'm going to actually just copy and paste from a different file so that I have all of my favorite rules in place. Get that right. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of that and that. Get rid of all of these. And get rid of the Jsdoc ones. I'll get prettier ones. I might actually leave the prettier ones. Okay. Cool. So now I've got some rules, and I just need one more thing worth mentioning here is Eslint has like tons and tons of rules that you can configure, and having to go through and do them all, like setting up your rules like this, it can be kind of a pain in the butt. So what you can do instead is actually adopt rules from other people that have published their rules online. So let's go to, let's see. I'm going to install a couple of dependencies here. So npm install dev dependency eslint config prettier and eslint plugin prettier and prettier itself. And you may have heard of Prettier. It's a tool to automatically or help you automatically format JavaScript projects, or I guess JavaScript, HTML, CSS, probably other languages as well. And yeah, we're going to get this installed so that I can actually adopt their practices and not have to write them all myself. So what have we got with that installed? If I kind of close some things down, maybe reopen them, I may actually see some of these changes. Okay. Prettier was not found. Oh, right. So now that I've installed those plugins, what I need to do is tell Eslint to actually use those plugins. So let's see here. First of all, where I'm telling Eslint to extend someone else's rules, I have to actually use the extends feature. So we're going to extend the recommended Eslint plugin settings, and then we're also going to extend the not React, but the plugin for Prettier, and use their recommended settings. And that should extend our rules. But then in order to be able to use this plugin or reference this plugin, we have to actually define that we're using that plugin. So I think, well, let me see here. npm run lint should tell me, give me a hint. Okay. Kind of, sort of. In my browser, I should be seeing this hint. Why am I seeing that? Okay, that fixed. It was just hanging out because I had to configure Eslint. All right, perfect. Now we can see that it's working. We can see that it's working because now we're getting these red squigglies where I actually don't like these. If I have an object definition, I don't like the keys to have parentheses or quotes around them if it's not needed. And that is a setting that's in line with Prettier. So it's going to say, hey, you have an error. Instead of using quotes env, just use env. And that goes for all of these settings where we're using unnecessary quotes. So when we hit save, those all get removed. Also, if we did something like have a whole bunch of extra white space, it's going to complain and say, hey, you don't need all these extra white spaces. So when I hit save, it automatically fixes that for me. Okay, cool. Yo, what's up, y'all? Looks like I just got raided. Chipsat is confused. Rowdy raid incoming. Yo, Brent, Stoney, how was the stream? How'd the rest of the stream go over on the portfolio? Dang, Stone Eagle coming in with all these subs. Wow, thank you so much. All All right, Sunny Eagle, you missed out because we have just been going through, and today what I'm working on is essentially getting catching errors or functional errors and stylistic errors in JavaScript code bases, and how I like to set mine up to maintain consistency and type safety, and eventually like testing stuff. So we're gonna see how far we can get to writing tests and all that. What y'all miss, you don't make empty promises. I make empty promises all the time. Check this out. Const for Stony equals promise dot resolve with nothing. Empty promise. That's such a stupid joke. Don't even, just ignore that I said that. Anyway, what we're working on is, yeah, so let's see, we started with a brand new project from scratch and added a couple files in here with like utility things and just an imaginary application that we're running. And we first set up some TypeScripty stuff to tell VS Code, hey, use your built-in TypeScript language processing and go ahead and check my JavaScript files for me. And that way we get these, well, not this one. I think that's actually broken. Yeah. So now we're getting these like TypeScript checks for us. So if I try to do something like pass double without a parameter, it's going to say, hey, I expected one argument, but I got 0. If I pass in something that's like, sup, y'all, it's going to say, hey, this actually should have been a string, or this should have been a number, but you gave us a string, right? Yeah, Stanley, you're a sweetie. I don't care what everyone else says about you. You're all right. You know that? You're a good guy. So yeah, we got some type checking to catch static analysis bugs to prevent us from doing stupid things like pass in invalid parameters. I guess that doesn't really matter, but you love TypeScript, but you hate type definitions. What do I say about you? I am right there with you. In fact, I really hate writing TypeScript. And so I do everything with Jsdoc Blocks, which I was explaining to Gettin what JavaScript is and how to kind of implement what TypeScript is, and how to implement it without really having to touch TypeScript too much. So the second thing we did after adding TypeScript was we added Eslint. And Stony Eagle, this is where you're going to be so happy, because I don't like writing semicolons. As you can see throughout this application or this file here, there's no semicolons, or there's one. But we have some inconsistencies and we're missing some things. And what I like to do is be really lazy. So instead of writing the semicolons in all myself, I like to use a tool called Eslint that will, one, yell at me if I omit my semicolons. It's going to give this red little squiggly and say, hey dude, oh gosh, give me the red squiggly, please. There you go. Hey dude, you need to insert a semicolon there. So if I do, it's all happy. But because I'm lazy, I can actually tell VS Code to say, hey, anytime that I hit save, just go ahead and add everything that's missing for me. So all of these missing semicolons are now there. Good man. That's right. Defining an object is simple. Defining a complex function is a pain in your ass. Yes. And we're not going to get into that today because I think that the TypeScript journey is a long and arduous one, and you don't want to start with that to begin with. But yeah, it's all good. Yeah, as long as I ship the code with them. Actually, by the time I write production code, I don't know if there's semicolons or not, because it's usually passing through a build tool anyway. So what does that say about me? I don't know. Anyway, what we looked at just now is adding Eslint to a project, what it is, and kind of a little bit on how to configure it. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on how you should configure Eslint because one, that is very subjective, and two, there's a lot to cover in here that's a little bit confusing. My goal here is just, if you're not familiar with Eslint, check it out. If you're not familiar with linting, check it out because it's really handy to take a project where some places you have semicolons, some places you don't, some places you have a bunch of extra white space, and some places you have unused variables like let x, right? You have unused variables and whatever. And having Eslint is really handy because it'll point out all of those things. Typescript as well will point out a lot of those issues where you have some things that can be cleaned up. So if I hit save really quick, all of my functions now have parentheses around them. All of my line endings have semicolons. And then where I have something like an unused variable, it's still going to catch my attention here, and I can just like get rid of that. So that's pretty handy. How are we doing so far? We're about halfway through, and we've covered quite a lot. So the other thing that I want to show off is 100% guarantee. It's a pain to write, but like 1,000,000%. What is that? Yeah, 1,000,000% guarantee that you will thank yourself later. Yeah, Brent, what were you saying? You need to get better about using linting. You rely only on prettier, and it's bad. Yeah, see, that's the thing is prettier. I like prettier like 90% of the way. And all right, Brent. Well, you should, yeah. But I like prettier. Let me put it this way before you go. I like prettier like 90% of the time, 90% of their decisions. But then the 10% of the decisions, the thing that I hate about prettier is you cannot configure some things. It's just you either use it or you don't, and that's it. And so the way I like to set up my linting is to tell Eslint to inherit or extend some of the rules from Prettier's recommended settings. And that way I can have Eslint be the only thing that's doing the formatting and the linting. And then once Eslint, I tell VS Code to format on save using the Eslint settings. So we go to VS Code and we do format, what is it? Format Eslint. There you go. You say, hey, editor, my default formatter, I want to be Eslint, so I don't even need to have Prettier running as a plugin or anything. And then anywhere that I don't like what Prettier does, I can turn it off because I can disable certain things specifically to Prettier. So that's my setting. I personally I much prefer having Eslint doing all my formatting and so there's not that battle between Prettier and Eslint. Sometimes you may also see where you hit like Control Save and then Eslint runs and does the formatting, and then Prettier runs and changes the formatting, and then you can't satisfy either of them. Yeah, so just having Eslint in control is great. Okay, so we've covered catching some bugs, some functional bugs using some very basic TypeScript settings, and not even really using TypeScript, just telling our editor to use the built-in TypeScript language support to check our JavaScript files, and then using some JavaScript-y code commenting syntax to tell TypeScript actually what is going on in our functions. And that's going to catch some functional errors. Hate autosave and format on save. If you do Control Z and save, you lose the future form control. Why? Oh, Control Y. No, I don't think so. If I hit Control Z and Control Y, I get both of them. Oh, if I hit Control Z and then save and then Control Y, I lose that. Yeah, that's a pain because then technically the editor has done a new action and it can't go I mean, it can't go forward. Well, once you auto format on save, it's gone as forward as it can go, or like you can't redo because it's already done. Something like that. It's kind of hard to explain. Okay, cool. So we've caught, let's see, static analysis issues. We've caught stylistic issues. Now we're going to catch like functional issues. So we're going to do another project here. Oh, this was the other thing I wanted to show off with Eslint, that if I have errors in my code base, I can run this lint command from my terminal, and it will check my code and tell me where I'm missing things. So if I go back to my code and I like remove a semicolon and save without formatting, so now this file is saved, and I run this, where is it? Am I down there? Okay. If I run this command to npm run lint, Eslint is going to say, hey, in this file at main.js, on line 5 at column 30, we have an error. You're supposed to insert this semicolon here. So we can go back to our code and say, in main.js, on line 5 at column 30, we're missing the semicolon. Hit save and go back and run our linter one more time. And it's going to say, cool, you have no errors. You have a couple warnings, but no errors. All right, next thing's next. To make sure that our code is running well to make sure our code is running well, we're going to get into writing like tests. So Eslint is going to check that everything looks and follows the same consistent styling format. So our code practice, our code styling guidelines are being enforced. Typescript is going to check that we're not introducing any sort of, not runtime bugs, but like any code that can be analyzed statically is not having an error. So for example, if we tried to pass in a string where we're expecting to pass in a number, we're going to get an error, and it's going to say, hey, bro, that should be a string. So we pass in a string or a number. But then there's still some logical issues. Yelling, yes, exactly. I'm going to save you the hassle, save your throat, your vocal cords, so you no longer have to yell at me. So now my linter is going to. So what we're going to do next is there's some logic that there's some gaps that bugs can still get through into our code base, and that is like runtime bugs. So TypeScript is good for catching static analysis stuff, but what if we introduce some weird bug in our code that's like, oh, I don't know, what if this like throws an error? Maybe not this one. New error. Right, so technically double still works as far as TypeScript is concerned. We have this function that takes a number and returns never, I guess, but we have some, well, this is not a good example. Why did I not have a good example of how to do this? A runtime only bug or a logical bug. I know. We can have a function called isEven. No, that's not going to work either. I can't think of a good reason or a good example, but there's some cases where what we've done so far is still not going to catch the bugs. So, that's a good example. Dang it. Is type. This might work. Okay, I have a good example. Well, TypeScript can actually go a really long way to help with this. But if we had some code that we said like if is number. Now let's see. If we had some code logic that was like if some variable like an array was type object, then we're going to say console log it's an object. It's an object. Cool. So the problem that we have here is we well, more like this. Instead of is type object, but let's say like type of that equals object. My var. Cool. Okay, we're gonna say const my var equals an object, and we should see that this is an object, right? If this script runs, let's go ahead and run it. We're gonna go to our terminal and say node./main source main, and we're gonna see that in fact, yes, it's an object. And the problem here is that we may have some logical issue in our code, because if we change my var to an array, we would expect this not to run, right? Maybe in the way that we write our application, we would expect this not to run because this is an array, not an object. So if we go to JavaScript, trusty JavaScript is going to say, actually, it's an object because type of array, if we look at what JavaScript will actually tell us, and we say type of array equals object, same with type of any function. Oh, I guess not a function, but type of null is object. And I'm sure that there's other weird things in there that are considered objects that JavaScript is kind of funny about. So, idea to run console in. Oh, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, got my terminal here. And I guess I could do node and type of array. Or if you're saying, like, I could just run node./source main. Yes, I could do that. I don't know why. I'm not used to running the built-in console. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a reason for that. But anyway, we can see that there's some logical issues here, right? We're going to say, actually, I want to get, if it's an object, I want to log that it's an object. If it's an array, I don't want to log that it's an object. I want to log that, whatever, it's an array or it's not an object, right? So to account for bugs like this, TypeScript generally is not going to help us with that, because I'm sure for that example there is a way for TypeScript to do it, but in general it's probably better to rely on unit tests. So we're going to come here and we're going to create some unit tests. I'm going to create a file called utils.test.js. I follow this syntax where I just name my test files after the files that they test, and then append test to it. That way my tests are right next to the files. And we're going to go to our code and say Preference saves you switching. Yeah, I don't know. I don't mind switching, but I'm also just used to switching. See, like I did that without even thinking about it as I was talking, as you were telling me. But we're going to install npm install another dev dependency. In this case, we'll use vtest, which we did some fun streams on not too long ago. Vtest. Cool. And then we're going to go to our code, and we are going to add a new terminal command called test, which is going to run vtest. I think that's all I need to do. So if I run npm test, it runs my test, which I think searches my code and says, yep, okay, it's working. And the problem is there are no tests. Cool. So now what I want to do is start using vtest. And what have I done in the past for this? Let's see. All right, so I'm actually going to import one of the codes that we wrote in our previous project. I'm not going to, just going to delete some of this stuff. Don't need that. Faker, maybe we'll look at, and then we don't need this, don't need that, don't need that, don't need that. And I think I need that. All right, we'll just get rid of a bunch of this stuff. Boop. Cool. I'm going to comment this out, and we'll walk through this line by line. Don't need before each. We may want describe. We may want test. We will want expect, and I don't think we'll need vi or v. So what we're going to do is bring in this file that we're testing, bring in some of the tools that we want to test. I'm going to say git type up from /utils.js. This should also offer double and isType. Cool. So let's describe our tests. This is going to be the test suite for my utils. And inside of here, I'm going to create a, what is this? I don't really want this. Do I want that? I don't think I need that. I'm going to describe the get type method. And I think, do I need like, oh, I do need test. I need, yeah, I've got test. Cool. I think actually, instead of test, I can just use it. So now we can say, we can use this it function, and I should say, yeah, it should return the type of the given value. And, you know, you just end up asking VS Code to do everything for you. So, yeah, that actually looks pretty much exactly how we want. Let's see. I have a syntax error here somewhere. Okay, we've got, I think this is missing there. Cool. We have one little issue. That's so funny. Eslint doesn't like having an empty function. But if you have a function with just an empty comment in it, it doesn't really care. So I'm just going to do the quick fix, disable it for this line, and then we don't get that little red squiggly. Okay, so now what we've got is this function that's going to say, hey, get type should actually do all of these things, right? We expect it, if I pass in any of these values, this is what I expect to get back. Where before we saw that issue where like type of an array equals object, what we actually want this function to do is when we pass a type of an array, or whatever, get type array, we want it to equal the string of lowercase array. So in doing this, we can run our code now, and it looks like because we're using vtest, I don't need Eslint anyway, really. Oh, because of GitHub Copilot. I think I definitely need Eslint. But yeah, so this test, because we're using vtest, it just goes into this like watch mode. So anytime we make changes to our tests, it will automatically run and check it for us. So if I say this should be numbers, it's going to rerun, I think, and it's going to tell us, hey, you have a logical error. We expected to receive a string of numbers, and we got a string of number. Now, if you were on the stream during the vtest live streams, you probably, we did a lot of this already, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail. But the point being that there are things that Eslint is not going to be able to catch for you, of course, because Eslint is like a code style checker. But there's logical things that TypeScript is not going to be able to check for you. And that's where testing, unit tests come in. So let's see what we can do really quick to just kind of finish up this suite of tests. I've got that. You gonna help me? Yeah, double. Come on. Yes, thank you. GitHub Copilot for the win. And then describe is type. It's going to do it for me. Not gonna do it for me. So we're gonna have to write this one ourselves. How prehistoric. So I'm going to say, I expect is type for, and check if the type is number to equal true. And maybe like a string, yo, equals string to equal true. I expect this to be false. Number to be false. I hit save. So far, what do we got? We do have something. No test found in suite. Missing that. Okay, that's all in the right place now. And it should what? It should return true or false for the appropriate type. Doesn't really matter what we do there. Appropriate. Appropriate type. It doesn't really matter because this is just an example of how we're writing tests. We don't need to actually be too good about the tests today. But the point is that it's going to catch some things that TypeScript cannot check, which means we now have two ways of testing our code, right? We have npm run lint, which is going to check our code styling matches what we have told our code style to match. We have some logical checks, npm run test. I think that there's a way to do that behind the scenes. So vtest, let's see, should be API CI, also run link stage. Run, do not watch. Okay, cool. So if I just want to run the test once, I can run that with the, what was it, --run command. It's going to run it once, and I think it's not going to be in watch mode. Okay, cool. So we're going to exit out of that. Great. And I'm working up to something that hopefully will be helpful. So we have one command, which is, let's see, Eslint is going to check our code for style. vtest with the --run flag is going to check our code for functional, whatever, that it functions as expected. Now we're going to add one more command, which is to make sure that TypeScript will actually, the static analysis that we're seeing here will actually run. We can run that programmatically. So we're going to see, how do I want to do this? I think I'm going to do npm install dev dependency TypeScript. So now, instead of depending on the built-in TypeScript within our code editor, we can actually add a command to our code that will run TypeScript. We're going to say ts is going to be tsc. That stands for the Typescript Compiler. And I think if I run npm run ts now, what's it going to do? Oh, it's going to do some things I don't want it to do. That's okay. Okay, cannot write file because it would overwrite input file. That's right. So essentially, the Typescript Compiler is a tool that is generally used to take a TypeScript file and transform it into a JavaScript file. Now, because in my case, I'm already starting with JavaScript files, I don't need to I don't need to transform those. So what it's telling me is, hey, if we run the TypeScript compiler, it's going to take your main.js file and it's going to output it to main.js, which means it's going to overwrite the file that's already there. So it just bails out. So what we do instead is we go back to our configuration settings and we say no emit true. This way it won't try to emit any files. I think if I got that correctly, then we can run this again and it will just check for our type errors. Cool. This is a bunch of stuff that shouldn't even be there because it's looking inside of node modules. I don't want it to do that though. So give me 1 minute while I look up. I have this. Maybe I need to look at another project I have. Okay, so now we need to tell TypeScript where our files are, I think. So you can say our files are going to be main.js, and that may be the only file we need to do. Let me try this one more time now. Run TypeScript. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed, everyone. It's still checking node modules for some reason. So let's try something else. I'm going to try exclude node modules, please. Right, well, I have no idea how to get around this error. So, yeah. That's not very helpful. Huh. All right, let's see if I've done this anywhere else. All right, well, I'm not going to let this slow me down. I'm going to keep going with what we're trying to get to the end of, or what we're trying to get to by the end of this string. And I'll circle back on this to explain it when I finish it up. So the goal of all this, why am I looking at all of these tools that can run commands from the terminal, right? Like, why isn't it not just good enough to look at the code as I'm writing it and make sure that my code is good and then say, cool, job done, I fixed the problems, right? Like, if I wanted to get rid of these little errors, I could say console log type and is number, and suddenly those errors are gone, right? Job done, go crack a beer, throw on the TV, and hang out with the dog. But the problem is that not everyone on my team may be using VS Code, and maybe some code gets into the project that like a human didn't even write. Like maybe another machine output some files and made a pull request or something like that. So in order to address that issue, one of the best places to check for consistency or check for errors or run these checks for like styling consistency, TypeScript errors, any functional errors in our unit tests is to run those checks, not just on every individual's machine, but to run those checks at the GitHub repo, where it's like the single source of truth, right? Because how you may build a pipeline for your code to go from your laptop to the production environment to being deployed to a web server. You may start by writing some code on your computer and then like logging into your web server and just dragging that file over, and sure, that's a way to get it onto the machine. But more often than not, as you get into more production, like enterprise level code, logging into a web server and dragging a file is kind of a pain in the butt, and humans are slow at that. So what you probably want to do instead is have robots automatically take your code and send it to production. And ideally, especially if you're using tools like Git or GitHub, ideally you're sending that code to production whenever it gets into a GitHub repo, right? So that is where, there's a bunch of different tools. There's a bunch of different Git hosting platforms. Doesn't have to be GitHub, but today we are going to be looking at GitHub, and particularly one of the features that they support, which is GitHub Actions. So what GitHub Actions are is, if you want to read more about it, I guess you could go, you could just do what I'm doing, which is just Google GitHub Actions. And let's see, what does it say they do? Automate your workflow from idea to production. Yeah, essentially it's cool because let's say when a new pull request comes in, you can run code against that pull request. Or when a new commit lands on your GitHub repo, you can have functions run automatically with that code. For example, to check if there's errors in it or to push it to production. So we are going to run some of those ourselves today. Let's see, am I over here? So the way we get started with that is we create a file called .github, and that's where GitHub is going to know, or where it's going to look for things that are related to GitHub. And then inside of there, we can create a folder called workflows, I think. Okay, and then inside of workflows, oh no, my music stopped. Here we go. There we go. Inside of workflows, we can create any file that we want, and we can call it whatever we want. So I'm going to have one called I would probably throw these all into one. So let's just say like checkcode.yml. So GitHub Actions are broken into YAML files, which is why it has the .yml extension. And what we can do is give it a name, call it like check code. And we're going to say on which actions we want to run this code. I'm going to say on, what is it? On any push to certain branches. So the branch that I want is like production, or no, sorry. The branches I want are going to be a list, and I might say production and develop, maybe staging. Oops. Okay, so here what we're telling GitHub is I have this workflow. I'm just calling it check code, and this can be any arbitrary string. And then these are the actions upon which I'm telling GitHub to use. If this is confusing, you should probably just check the documentation. There's a lot of different actions that we can run this workflow on. I'm saying when these actions take place and on which branches these actions happen, I want you to run the workflow that I'm about to describe. So what is the workflow that we're going to describe? Well, we're going to say this workflow has some jobs, and I'm going to call this job lint, and we're going to run this job, runs on. This is where we tell it what type of machine this workflow is going to run on. So in the same way that I have a terminal on my machine, and my machine is a Windows machine, but my machine is also running Windows subsystem for Linux, we need to describe to GitHub what their machine needs to look like that's going to run our code. So in their machine, I want to use a machine that's running the latest version of Ubuntu. And what this job is going to do is it's going to have some steps. And those steps are going to be a list. And now we're going to do some stuff that is maybe hard for me to explain. It's going to be hard for me to explain. What am I doing? So uses, you have to tell it, like, essentially someone else can describe a workflow, and you can use other people's, like, you can make a copy of other people's projects. This is so dumb. I don't know how to explain this, but essentially what we're saying is we're going to define a uses where we're checking out the current version. This is a predefined thing in GitHub Actions that we're going to have a copy of, and it allows us to check out the current version of the app in this Ubuntu machine when this runs. So when this workflow runs on any of these branches, we're going to grab an Ubuntu machine, and we're going to check out our code. Hopefully that's clear. Okay, and then let me see. I actually need to reference a different project that I have been working on. Guess I can do that. Let other people see. I don't need to keep it secret. So github.com/Austin Gill, and then there should be utensils. is a project that I have some GitHub actions on. I've got workflows and CI, yeah. Okay, so this is called CI. It's going to run on production and staging. I'm setting up an environment variable, and then I'm describing my job. So I just have one job that runs on the latest version of Ubuntu. It's going to check out, it's going to use the same checkout thing. Install node modules. Okay. I think I'm going to just copy this. All right, so let's see what we've got here. I've got several steps to take. We've got the action that checks out our code. So on a fresh new machine, this is going to check out the code in our GitHub repo. This action is going to set up a cache in order to cache the node modules. This action is going to install our npm dependencies, but only the CI version of npm dependencies, which which is also hard to explain. Hold on, try vanilla JS. You don't need Eslint anyway, really. I don't know about that. I totally thought that was code thin. Okay, so we're going to install CI dependencies. So this should only install a subset of things, not everything. And then we're going to run a function called audit. Now, audit is, well, we don't want to run audit. What we're going to do in our code is we're going to run our lint command. We're going to do lint, and then we're going to do test. And that should be, if I did this right, then what this should do is run our linting and our testing one after the other. And if our code fails, this workload will stop. So what you could have is, as long as these pass, you could add another step here that's like pushes to production. Name is deploy, and run. It's going to be deploy command, whatever. We don't have one because we're not working with an actual project. But that's as far as I'm going to take this code. Now that I have that in place, let me actually set this up and say git init. And now I need to actually push this to test it. Let's see if we can do this. GitHub.com. Okay, I need to sign in. Give me just a moment. Where's my code? Two-factor auth. There it is. Get a light on in here. There we go. Okay, now that I am signed in, I can bring this over. I'm going to create a new repository. We're going to call this one GHA to match the name. Okay, it's a public repository. Cool. Let's copy this. I'm going to say git remote add origin. That let's see. We should be able to do our first commit now. It should be initialized. Publish to GitHub, please. There we go. Open up VS Code. I think it was, didn't realize that I had initialized my repo. I may want to put them in a group called streams to not clutter my GitHub. I didn't know that I could group repositories. That's slightly embarrassing, and that's actually a really good tip. So let's see, we don't have any changes, come on. Okay, right, now that we have all of our changes, now that we have a Git repo, we really need to add a gitignore file. In there, we'll put node underscore modules, hit save. That is no longer being tracked. We have 3,000 changes. Now if we reload, we should only have 10, 9. Cool. Well, on GitLab you can. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if GitHub supported that. Okay, so now that we have this in place, this is going to be the most annoying part because we're going to do any time that I've had to do a git commit or that I've tried setting up GitHub Actions. This is the most annoying thing because I basically have to do a new commit every time until I finally get the action working like I want it to. So let's try this. We're going to publish this branch. Actually, I'm going to rename it. Git checkout, or what is it? Git checkout branch main. Git branch leak master. Cool. See, Stony Eagle, you have influence over me. Now I'm using my terminal here. Okay, so what's the problem here? Git push. I need to set upstream. I always forget to do that. There we go. We push up our changes. And now if we go back to GitHub, we should have our code living here. And we should have something else. If we go to our actions, we have some new actions now. Check code. This workflow has not run yet. Yeah. Okay, this workflow is not running. Why is this workflow not running? I think it's because I have production, develop, and staging, but I did not say it should be running on main, not production. Okay, I think I'm also on main. I've made my change. Okay, change workflow branch. We'll save that. We'll push that up. It never works in there for some reason. Okay. Nope, that's in the wrong place. Okay, so now if we reload, or we didn't need to reload, it showed automatically. Now we have this workflow running, which means we can look at our code, and it's going to run this job of lint, which actually was trying to break that into multiple jobs. But we should have had, 2 different jobs. Should have had one for lint and a different one for test, but instead we have one job called lint that runs lint and test. So let's look at what we've got here. Cool. What did this do? It ran our lint command, which runs eslint on source. It ran our test command, which looks like it got the results from our passing tests, which means don't know. I guess I could have another function here called deploy, and then this is going to run. I don't know. Echo flute, which I think should work in the terminal. Echo root. Yeah, perfect. So this would be like an imaginary deploy script, right? Great. Now, what I need to do is one, prove that that would actually run. So I proved that that would actually run by going to my code, making my changes, more new workflow. There we go. Push that up. Why does this never work? So annoying. Push that up. That should now have triggered a new action to run. Yep, here we go, more new workflow. And this updates automatically on demand. So once this is done, it should be complete. We're running lint, we're running test. Taking 8 seconds, 9, 10. All right, test is taking a bit longer, 28 seconds. This is a really long time for a single test to run. We're just gonna sit. Oh, okay. Oh, no, apparently it took 2 seconds and was just making me wait. So cool, we got our lint to run. Looks like we didn't have any errors. We got our test to run. And because both of those passed successfully, we had our deploy script run, which just echoes woot to the console. In your case, you would probably have a more complicated deploy pipeline. Now, why is this interesting? Is because we have a number of things. And the first one I'm going to show off is what happens if someone makes a change to our code in, let's say, main.js, whatever. No, someone makes a change in utils and says that double now returns 2 times 2, right? Here's a perfect example where TypeScript is going to work just fine, but functionally speaking, we have a bug in our code. Couldn't think of this before. But let's say we have our function, our code double, right? This function double. Well, if you remember when we wrote our tests, double should expect the, if you pass in 4 to equal 8. It's not going to be the case this time. That's going to be an error. We're also going to do introduce a stylistic bug, which is omitting the semicolon there, and we're going to hit save. So now, if we look at the changes in our code, we can see that we've introduced 2 changes, one missing a semicolon, one introducing a functional error. And if I run my test locally, I can see that running my test locally will fail. Running my lint locally will also fail. So I want to catch those changes in my code base though, right? So that it's not just dependent on me, but dependent on other people, anyone that has access to the code base. So we'll go here and we'll say, oops. We'll commit that. We'll push that once it's done. and then we'll go up to GitHub, and we'll check in on our actions. And we'll see that our new commit is there. I'm feeling some of this music. Okay, oops is running. And we have an issue. We're no longer seeing that green check mark. Now we can see that in our first job, we can see that when we got to the lint stage, we had an error. Eslint ran into this error of insert semicolon in utils on line 15, column 79. And because it ran into this error, it actually didn't even go to the next steps to run the test or the deploy script. So let's see, if we go to our code, well, this isn't going to tell us anything interesting. Well, it is going to tell us that there's an error in the latest commit. All checks have failed. I go to these details. I can see where those checks have failed. It's going to tell me where the issue is, which means even if I'm not using VS Code, or even if I don't have Prettier like set up, I didn't run it locally, I can see, oh shoot, I'm working on this project and I have this error here. Well, I can even go to my code here. Let's see if I can do this. Like even if I don't have my personal computer set up, I can see, okay, in source utils, line 15, column 79, cool, let's go here. Let's go to source. Let's go to utils. Let's go and make an edit. Let's go to line 15, column 79, insert that semicolon, and saying we'll say learning from Stony Eagle. And then we'll commit that change. Cool. That means a new commit landed in our branch, which means we can see this little yellow dot. Oh, some checks have not completed. Okay, cool. Let's check out the details there. This is going to take us to our workflows. Our workflow is going to, yeah, what's this do? We're adding to, I don't know, setting up the machine. It's going to go down to our lint. Our lint now passed. We see that Eslint, we have this warning, but that's not an error. So there we go. But the next thing did fail, which is our test. So if we look at our test, we can say, oh no, expected 4 to deeply equal 8. What's the problem there? And of course, we know what the problem is. We'll go back to our code. We will, I don't know a good way to keep this in sync, but okay, you should actually want, you're not quite up to date. We're gonna git status, git pull, there we go. Okay, now everything is up to date, and we can say, cool, we introduced a bug here. This should actually be 2 times v, and fixing broken code. Hit save there. Push that up. And come back to our code. We can see, it's thinking, some actions are running. We can check the details. And it looks like the linter passed, the test passed, and because both of those went successfully, it went on to the deploy script, and whoop, we deployed successfully. So anyone have questions about that? I know I covered kind of a lot. And I would say there's two things that we can do to take this a step further. One, I could get those that TypeScript error work sorted out, because with that TypeScript thing, you could actually have it do all of the static analysis as well and fail if it fails. What's up, Phils? Where are you coming from? Have you been lurking this whole time? Yeah, doing pretty well. Kind of had to take a break from that Pokemon thing and work on something else. Okay, cool. There's a TSC plugin for Eslint and also an Eslint plugin for TSC. How to choose? So I think they kind of do different things. There's also like a question of, do you use do you use TypeScript to transpile your code, or do you use like Babel to transpile your code? And I'd say TypeScript is really good for generating type definitions, and I think Babel has been proven to be much faster for transpiling code. As far as Eslint and TypeScript, I don't use the TypeScript compiler. I use, because I like to write I don't necessarily always like to compile my code like this. I'm just using ES modules anyway. But I do like TypeScript compiler to run to make sure that it will fail if my static analysis fails, or if my type checking fails. So I don't know if that's clear, but yeah. We gotta try. Why is this not working though? npm run ts, and it's going to reach into node modules for some reason. Yeah, so I run TSC and Eslint as part of my pipeline when I deploy something. TSC I run to make sure, just to get the static analysis benefits. Eslint I run to get the code style guide benefits. And I also run the test to get like logical testing. What are we working on today? So I have been sharing some of the tools that I use to kind of get quality control on my code. Okay, thank you so much. This is going to be, okay, skip lib check. Ugh, what is it? Why is that not a default? Okay, so let's go here. Skip lib check true, which means, let's try this. Oh, thank you. Okay, so what do we get with that? If we get rid of this and we say, what do I want TypeScript to actually check? Return, let's do this. Return v dot to uppercase, which is a string method, not a number method. And because TypeScript thinks this is a number, it's going to say this is an error. Now, if I save without fixing that, and I run this TS compiler again, I should get that error where we have that. Perfect. Thank you so much. I've ran into that issue quite a few times and have no idea. It's expected to install libs that don't have errors. Yeah. Okay. So with that in place, let's actually get the TypeScript checker running as well. So in our check code, we're going to lint our code. What do I like to check first? I like to check the one that runs the fastest first. So I think maybe lint and then TypeScript. Static analysis run TS. and then test, and then deploy. So this way we have quite a lot of checks. I should change this. nx.dev, I think you'll love it. I have heard of nx, I think. No, I haven't. No, yes, I have. Yeah, I haven't done any of the mono repo stuff, and I probably should. But it's gotten to a point where there's so many that are like, this is the best one ever, and it gets into like analysis paralysis, and I don't really have a lot of mono repos, so. But I will at some point. Next is the best one ever. What's up, Brent? Man, you just viable clan member. You are a viable member of my clan. Help me sort out this issue. So let's introduce a bunch of errors and walk through them, since Brent wasn't around. Okay. I have that. Let's see. This is what we're gonna do. Okay, so we fixed that. We fixed that. Let's see. Fixing DSC. All right, so Brent, I'm not sure if you were here or if we got all of this GitHub workflow stuff set up, but essentially, and you know what, Phil, I didn't even answer your original question. What we wanted to do was make sure that we have automated code quality checks in this stream. I wanted to show the tools that I like. Sound is funky again. Hello. Does that fix things? I do know Eslint plugin Unicorn. I like it. Some things about it I really don't like, but for the most part, I like it. Okay, great. And what tools are those? Gosh, Phil's. I promise you, no one else is going to distract me until I get their answer from here until it is answered. Phil's. So the way that we tackled this issue is in your project, you can have, in my opinion, like 3 types of bugs, or 3 types of bugs that can be easily fixed. Not bugs, 3 types of issues that can be easily fixed. One is type definition issues or static analysis issues, where maybe you have code that expects a string and you pass it a number. So in that case, I like to use the built-in TypeScript language support in VS Code. To enable the built-in TypeScript language support, all you have to do is add this tsconfig file. And because I'm using just plain old JavaScript, I can tell TypeScript to allow JS and to check JS. And then these other settings are required to get it to work the way I like. In order to really take advantage of the TypeScript language support and adding type annotations to your code, if you're just using JavaScript and not TypeScript files, you can use these Jsdoc blocks, where you can describe where a function expects 2 parameters in this case. The first one is named v and can be anything. The second one is named type and is a type of string. And then we say what the function returns. And by doing that, we see these handy type annotations where when we use the function, let's see, anyone that is consuming the function can see that the first parameter is anything, the second one is a string, and it returns a Boolean. So that way, if they accidentally put something in that is not what is intended, it will throw a little error. Or if you leave something out that it expects, it's going to say, hey, you only gave me 1 parameter, and I need 2. I don't know what's up with the mic, but I need to get this answer to Phil's before I answer any more questions. Before I get distracted, I will come back to your comments in a moment. Okay, so that's TypeScript, right? And you can go really deep into TypeScript, or you can stay kind of surface level.
I like living within the JavaScript world, and this is as far as I like to go. Now, fills, again, I'll come back to your questions. Keep throwing the questions into the comments. I'll come back to them, but that is the static analysis portion of ensuring good code quality. Second part is ensuring good practices, like consistent styling practices. So here, because we really like to make Stony Eagle happy, we want to make sure that things like semicolons exist at the end of every line. So you can see as I delete these, I'm getting little red squiggly lines and little warnings that say, hey, just so you know, you're not conforming to the coding style practices. So I have my VS Code set up where I can hit save and it'll automatically fix those for me if it's fixable. But the tool that we're using for that is Eslint. So we have this Eslint npm dependency that checks our code for any of those issues. We have some configuration settings here that basically correspond to my preferred style guide. And then the handy thing with that is, yeah, if I have errors, it's going to check that for me. Or things like if I say const b and don't use it, it's going to say, hey, you have an unused variable. You may want to get rid of it. Or if I have a ton of white space, it should check. Yeah, if I have a ton of white space, it's going to say, hey, you don't need all this. So if I hit save, automatically fixes it for me. And then the last one is making sure that logical bugs are caught as well. So that's where we're using vtest to create a bunch of type or test assertions. So example, if we have a function that doubles whatever the input is we expect double of 4 to equal 8. But if somehow we introduced a bug into our code like we have here, then our tests should catch it. So now that we've introduced a bug that should trigger all 3 of those issues, and we push up our code, we can see that the last step to getting all of this working nicely across a team and not just within your code is to use GitHub Actions and define some GitHub Actions that take advantage of that linter and that static analysis and the tester. So we can see we can see that an error has occurred. And in this process, if we open this, we can break down to, okay, it looks like our linter has errored, and it looks like Prettier wants a semicolon on line 22 of the utils folder. So if we go back to our code, we go to utils, we put that semicolon in, and let's just for a minute pretend that I don't see this little red squiggly. I can save and go to my code, push up this change, fixed semi. And then we're going to push this up as well. So Phils, I think I answered your question. Let me know if I did. And in the meantime, I'm going to look at these other questions coming in and show how, yeah, we fixed the linting error. Next, we'll check the static analysis, I think. So if I can close this down. I can go to my actions. We have a new action running that was supposed to fix the semicolon, and it looks like it did. So now our linter has passed, but our static analysis is now saying, hey, 2 uppercase does not exist on type of number. And so we go to our code and we say, oh yeah, that's supposed to be a number. So let's actually treat that like a number. We'll say that should be times 4, or maybe we had a typo that's like times 3. So now we're not getting any of those red squigglies. Now technically our code is like, cool, logically, yeah, you're in charge. Everything looks good to me. LGTM, know what I'm saying? Fixing TS error. Oh. Let's save on there. Push that up. All right. I'm going to look through these chats because y'all are going off now. Where did I get? Okay, Phil's. I think we got you. No, we got fixed it. Fixed the mic. Cool. That sounds much better. I need to figure out what's up with that because somehow my camera messes up with my microphone here. Oh, I think I might know what that is actually. Anyway. Okay. Did you like no abbreviations? That was a pain. Oh yeah, no abbreviations. I like no abbreviations as a the unicorn Eslint configuration, but I do have to disable it for certain abbreviations. Like, I don't know, some of them I have to turn it off. What is SAST versus DAST? I have no idea what this question means. What is SAST versus DAST? Okay, let's see. If we look at our actions again, we see that now we got that TypeScript error is fixed. Cool. So linting looks good. Static analysis looks good, but our tests logically are failing. So we go to our test and we say, oh, what's the problem? Oh, shoot. That's right. This is double, not triple. So there we go. We fixed our code. Oops. We fixed our code. Fixed test. We'll push that up. All right, back to the chat. How do you manage to switch microphone while not touching OBS? Now it sounds like a condenser. Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually not using OBS. I'm using Restream, but I do want to get onto OBS. Brent, should I learn Jsdoc first or just jump into TS or both? I think I have, funny enough you ask, I happen to have an article about that. Let's see, austingill.com. Let's look at these actions, see how those actions have changed. Booyah, we got the green check. And it looks like with that fix, not only have we fixed our linting issue and our static analysis issue, but we fixed our logical issue as well. And now here, let's see, TypeScript. Script. Here is an article that I wrote on getting started with TypeScript if you're interested. And as far as like which one you should learn first, I prefer Jsdocs because Jsdocs has been around a lot longer. And depending on the future of TypeScript, TypeScript may or may not survive. I don't know. I mean, it's got a really good footing, and there's a chance that some of the TypeScript features actually get brought into the JavaScript language, but there's also a chance that it won't survive. So as far as my preference, learning Jsdocs and learning like the TypeScript syntax, I don't know, you kind of learn them at the same time, but my approach was to learn Jsdocs first, and you can kind of like incrementally work your way towards needing TypeScript. So that's my answer. As you ask another question, why did I answer Stony Eagle? Because you're really good at grabbing my attention. Jsdocs first is neat because it helps getting you annotating your code, which is a good thing to carry over. Yeah, okay. So viable clan member, totally agree. I think Jsdocs, you're just going to annotate your code. But in both of them, they both accomplish the same thing. TypeScript is more of like a technology that can use Jsdocs to also provide that static analysis. Once in TS, you can use Tsdoc. That's right. Prettier is having a midlife crisis. Sure is. Lint. What is Lint? Dependency cruiser. Viable clan members just throwing out a bunch of stuff. And I'm like way behind on chat. So keep up or hold off while I catch up. Different bin errors. Auto lint using GitHub Actions too. I would love to learn that. Yeah, there's a couple things that I need to show off actually. It's like sneak. I'll look into that. Don't bother. It's P2W. How long before Eslint plugin Copilot? I don't know. Okay, so yeah, I guess I'm coming up on the end of what I wanted to share. So I'm going to end with, let's see. Oh, I closed what I wanted to see. Oh, well. So let me see. Let me bring this over. And yeah, I don't know if there's, I don't know if, Brent, what you were asking is kind of what I showed, how you can lint with GitHub Actions. That's basically what we did today. But there's some other stuff you can do. Yes, this is what I wanted to show. There's some other stuff you can do where you can install certain plugins to your GitHub and have them do things automatically, like this linting or whatever. One of the things that one of the plugins I absolutely love is Imagebot. So Imagebot lets you, it will automatically optimize images and make a new PR into your project. So if you make a commit that includes images in it, Imagebot will look for images in that repo, optimize it, and make a PR with the new versions of the optimized images. What are the other? Where do I see the ones that I have installed? Because I have some pretty cool ones. It's got to be around here somewhere. Line 14, let should be const. Yeah, you know what? I was trying to introduce that as a, or have that as an example for the Eslint stuff. And I guess I just didn't. That's weird that it didn't catch it. I guess I don't have the rule that says, hey, if you're not going to redeclare or reassign something, you shouldn't use let. That one snuck through the cracks. That's okay. Oh, let me share this repo too. In case anyone wants to see how I got this stuff set up. Yeah, you don't want to test the linting. You want the action so users can use their rules, but the repo would lint its own rules. You don't want to test the linting. So I don't, Brent, I don't know if I understand the question. You want the repo to define the settings, right? The linting rules, right? Let me turn this volume down. So like you push changes and it lints for you. Yeah, that was something that I didn't quite get to. And I wanted to, but let me see. Left hook. So there is this project. Yeah, we don't have enough time to get to it today, but there's this project called Left Hook. Well, first of all, there is this concept called Git hooks. And what Git hooks let you do is define essentially command line scripts that will run at various points during Git processes. So you can say, hey, before anyone runs a commit, I want to run this command. And left hook is a tool. Yeah, you use hooks for deploy. Yeah. So you can, so left hook is a tool that lets you like makes it easier to define what commands run on which hooks. But I'd say the most common way of handling this is there's a hook, git hooks. Let's see. Yeah, the most common one that I see is pre-commit. And here we go. The pre-commit hook is run first before you even type a commit message. So what this can do is by tapping into a pre-commit hook, you can actually modify the code before it gets committed. So when someone goes to their code, makes a change and says like, well, whatever, you get the idea, and says, oh, I want, updated double function to actually work correctly. And then they start to commit that code, the pre-commit hook will run, do anything that it needs to do, maybe modifies the code. In our case, maybe it runs Eslint and lints and makes sure that the code matches our coding style guide. And then if everything looks good, it will go ahead and commit that message. If it fails, it will prevent the commit from running. So this is super handy to run these fixes on the developers' machines before they actually push it to production. This is good to get for linting. I wouldn't say it's good for running tests. Like I wouldn't want to run tests before each of my commits, and I wouldn't want to run the Typescript compiler before each of my commits because that's going to really slow down my commits. Additionally, you don't want to depend on these actions running on pre-commit hooks because users can get around pre-commit hooks and push things anyway. And also, I can just run like a commit. I can make changes directly in the GitHub repo like we saw earlier. And if those changes occur directly on the repo, then those commit hooks may not run as well. So my thought process here is you really have to balance performance of how many functions or checks you're running on your code before pushing to production. That performance matters because eventually if you have a lot of actions running, like GitHub actions running all the time and they're taking a long time, GitHub is going to charge you for those. So if you can increase the performance and reduce the amount of work done in GitHub actions, that's going to save you money. On the other hand, you can move some of that workload to the developer's machine before they make changes to the code base. But doing that may not prevent buggy code from getting to production, because if they can circumvent Git hooks, they can still get buggy code onto the repo. And if the repo doesn't check that code and automatically pushes to production anyway, then you've created a path for buggy code to get to production. So it's best to just agree on linting rules and use them per dev environment. No. So in this case, I think to answer your earlier question, how does a Git repo determine linting rules? Well, if you have Eslint, you can have a file checked into your source code that determines all of the code or all of the rules. So if a user wants to have Eslint in, like if I want to ignore Eslint rules here, like this, right? This is going to scream at me because I'm not conforming to Eslint rules. Well, I can always just disable Eslint, right? For me to actually see these myself, okay, I can reload. For me to actually see these, Eslint has to be running. But if I have Eslint disabled or I'm using a different editor or whatever, the project itself has its preferred Eslint rules defined, and me as a developer can choose to ignore those or not. See? So I can hit save. I could commit this. If I had my pre-commit hook set up, then my pre-commit hook in this case would probably be, yeah, I'm going to have to go here in a minute, so I'm not going to be able to share it too much. But if I have a pre-commit hook set up, then I, as a developer, make this change. I go here, and we'll just pretend I have pre-commit hooks set up. I come here, and I say, cool, made some changes, right? I would commit this, and before it actually commits, behind the scenes, Git would run whatever my pre-commit hook is. And in my case, I might have a pre-commit hook that runs npm run lint -- fix. Oops, that's not actually going to work. Yeah, so if I just run lint, sorry, let me run this again. If I have my pre-commit hook set up to just run my linter, then my linter is just going to report that there's errors. If I have my pre-commit hook set up to pass the fix flag to Eslint, so we see Eslint source fix, then my pre-commit hook is going to run. It's not going to report this error because it's actually going to have made the change to the code base, and then I would have committed my code. So technically, this change here would have happened prior to the commit being run. Make sense? And now I'm going to undo that last commit. Cool. Well, that's it for me. I got to get going, but before I do, does anyone have any last questions or comments or anything like that? Hopefully people learned something new today, or a few things. And I shared that repo in the chat. So if anyone wants to look at the code, you can. I mean, the code itself is not particularly interesting, but you can see how everything is set up. Do not forget to raid. You are correct, sir. Where are we going? Who's calling it today? Let's see. All of this. Oh, I didn't even share all of the things. I don't even know where to find them, though. Profile, code spaces. Where do I see all of my apps? I don't know, but Imagebot is definitely my favorite. Oh, there's another one. Socket. Socket.dev. This one will check for security stuff in like pipeline vulnerabilities, supply chain vulnerabilities. Yeah. Anyway, where are we going to raid? Who's on right now? Burp. Anyone have a recommendation? I've been trying to find more people to follow, like more developers that are working on like cool development stuff, but I'm having. What is this? This is DevStream waterfalls. Code it live. All right. Cool. That is where we are going. Thanks for the suggestion, Brent. We'll be there in a few, and I will catch you all over there. All right. Thanks, y'all. I'll catch you. Oh, that's right. I'm not going to be here until next week. I'm doing a vacation. So catch you next Monday. So thanks for hanging out. See you then.